Hello, friends and audiobook fans. Today's episode is one of my top recommended titles from 2021. One of the most frequent questions we hear from listeners is whether we'd consider expanding on our theme and taking a deeper look into fiction and other sources of fascinating ideas. If you're one of our listeners who asked for this, we heard you and thank you for your suggestions. We'll be hard at work behind the scenes for the rest of this year, creating something we hope you'll love. Until then, we hope you enjoy this episode, and I look forward to sharing more with you in 2022. Do most of us really understand the true causes and the necessary solutions to climate change? This next title reveals important perspectives I'd never considered before. Welcome to Audiobook Reviews in 5. This is Yana, also known as Jana, and in today's episode, I'm reviewing How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, the solutions we have and the breakthroughs we need, written by Bill Gates, read by Will Wheaton. In How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, Bill Gates sets out to show us that achieving zero emissions by 2050 will not be simple or easy to do, but if we follow the plan he sets out in this book, it is a goal firmly within our reach. And I will add here, assuming we are all basically rational actors capable of getting along and resolving our differences. Gates starts with making the case for reaching zero emissions globally by 2050, making it clear that merely reducing emissions won't cut it. He does a reasonable job explaining the statistics, but here's where you'll want to download the accompanying PDF if you've purchased this title, because it's challenging to follow the details without the graphs and charts for context. Gates' call to action outlines purely pragmatic approaches, coupled with an unwavering optimism in science and technology. He warns us that climate change solutions so far have only focused on the easy stuff, such as passenger cars and using solar and wind to generate electricity. Remarkably, that's not even going to solve for a third of the problem. The most important messages in this book illustrate the systemic and industrial nature of climate change, beyond mere energy consumption. For example, Gates reveals that cement, one of the most common construction materials used to make concrete, is responsible for 6% of carbon emissions globally, and manufacturing and construction contribute to more than 30% of emissions. When we consider China's mission to build megacities, massive urban bundles whose populations exceed 10 million over the next decade, the implications are painfully clear. Emissions from these projects will dwarf anything we've experienced before, and there is currently no way to make steel or cement without releasing climate-warming emissions. Gates identifies the 5 grand challenges of climate change as manufacturing, 31%, electricity, 27%, agriculture, 19%, transportation, 16%, and buildings, 7%. Since there's no single solution for any of these sectors, Gates proposes we speed up the cycle of innovation and attract a mix of private and public investment that is more risk-tolerant than we're used to seeing. One of the main obstacles that Gates helpfully explains is the concept of a green premium. The green premium is the cost associated with using more sustainable materials and processes, and why economies are unlikely to change if they can't afford to. Gates uses this concept throughout the book to illustrate opportunities and challenges, reminding us that unless we bring these green premiums down by about 95% through innovation, we're unlikely to hit the goal of zero emissions by 2050. On an interesting side note, much has been said over the last decade about electric vehicle battery technology, so it's a sobering reminder when Gates points out that container ships and aircraft can't adopt current electrical operating models due to the vast amounts of power they require. My critiques of this audiobook are these. Actor Will Wheaton's narration is excellent, but Gates's writing style is more textbook than manifesto, which is to say, highly informative, but not exactly riveting storytelling. I found my attention wandering more than I care to admit. To be fair, Gates acknowledges his limited influence and interest in politics and culture, and he seems aware that these factors are more difficult to control than the technological solutions. But this makes for a lack of discussion about geopolitical conflict and intractable differences, for which we'll need solutions to champion innovation and economic cooperation. Still, Gates has pledged to commit $2 billion of his own money to research and development toward climate change, and he's among the few individuals with the courage to invest massively in breakthrough energy innovation, which is to be commended. The afterword of this book, written in November 2020, compares government lack of preparedness for COVID-19 to our current lack of preparedness for climate change impact. Although governments were warned by experts for years about an impending pandemic, failure to prepare and political polarization led to devastating outcomes around the world that might otherwise have been avoided. Climate change presents even greater challenges, so the implications are clear. We must act now. And even if you don't plan to listen to this title, I'll second Bill Gates' ask that you advocate for what you believe in, rather than spending your time and energy opposing what you don't. And if you're looking for ideas on where to start as either a voter or consumer, check out gatesnotes.com, the blog of Bill Gates, which I've included in my show notes, for recommendations for making a maximum impact. That's all for this episode of Audiobook Reviews in 5. Thanks for listening. If you have not yet done so, please follow us on Facebook and subscribe to Audiobook Reviews in 5 on Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and many others. By subscribing, you help increase the profile of this podcast and chances of other listeners finding it. I look forward to checking in with you all again soon. Please stay safe and be well.